Hi, my name is Sean Dombrowski. A little over 10 years ago, I helped create a project that we call Edible Acres, which is a permaculture nursery nestled in the Finger Lakes of central New York. It's a cold, temperate climate here. And over the years, over nearly 20 years now of experimenting with perennial plant propagation, I feel like I've learned a fair bit on how to start a small scale or human scale nursery. I was invited this last summer by a permaculture training group up in Canada called Verge Permaculture to put together a 4-week training program on permaculture-centered propagation training. And so what I'd like to do, I shared that over the summer, and now I'm re-recording this whole presentation. It's a 4-part series to share for free on YouTube here. And so I'm going to start with this first presentation being an overview of what Edible Acres is, talking about the ethics that wrap around our nursery, how we operate, how a permaculture nursery can look, some ideas on what it might take to get the ball rolling if that's something of interest to you. Then we're going to get into section 2, 3, and 4 will be really in-depth discussion about what I understand in the realm of propagation. It'll be all direct information on how to propagate from hardwood and from softwood cuttings, from seeds, and this will all be through the lens of someone who's figuring it out as they go along, which is me. So hopefully these things will be useful to you. The last video will be about actionable steps if you had interest in developing a permaculture nursery, either for fun or for revenue for yourself. So it's going to be broken down into 4 videos. I'll try to organize things through chapters, and you're invited to share questions in the comments. I'll do my best to answer, but the community is encouraged to answer those questions as well. If you find all of this super valuable, that's wonderful. If you'd like to support us, you're welcome to use the PayPal link listed here to offer a little tip, but feel no pressure to do so. I'm hoping this is useful to you. Feel free to share these videos far and wide to anyone that you think might derive some value from it. And so that being said, let me hop right into presentation 1 about who we are and what this is all about. There'll be a link in the description for the most important thing to write down or make a note of is the last link, tinyurl.com/ all those letters. I plan to leave this presentation up available for free indefinitely. That'll be the case for all 4 of them. So if you make a little note of that somewhere, you can always return to this video, but that's if you miss a slide as we go, feel free to just refer back to this. It is a free and available slide show online. So we are Edible Acres. We have a YouTube channel, as I'm guessing most of you know. If you're watching this, chances are you know about us through that. But maybe I can share a little bit more information about who we are. But let me give first the sense of what I'd like to talk about in this particular set of slides. So it'll be an introduction, then I want to get into how we operate, like what are the ethics and principles that wrap around our nursery? How do we function? How do we keep held within a framework in that way? Talk about access to land. We have some what I think are interesting, creative, really human-centric solutions to getting access to small plots of land in order to develop and expand our nursery. And then I think importantly, some design considerations around how a nursery can start to develop. So maybe you already are growing annuals, or you've got a CSA farm, some sort of flower farm, and you want to integrate nursery aspects to it. I'd like to share how that can look. First things first, this is, to my mind, I think a really sweet photo to represent the sensibility, the sense of what a permaculture nursery can look like. Not that it should, but that it can look like. So this is a photo of our backyard, and by all accounts, this could land visually as just an abandoned or barely managed landscape somewhere out near a wetland. And that could be kind of true, but if you relax your eyes or if you zoom in, depends on how that works for you. What's happening in this photo is actually really curated and I think really functional. We do have a wetland. There is, hopefully this laser will work. There is this group of cattails in here. This is a small hand-dug pond. It is a wet site that we farm on, and so we leaned into that and dug a little bit to create some pond, some water holding, and put that soil nearby to grow crops. In fact, right where we dug out the pond and applied soil, there's now cuttings of elderberry. We'll talk about propagating cuttings in some of the other videos. There are cuttings of poplars, but then there's also annuals. There's some beans in here. There's some flowers. There's some poppies growing in here. And then there are mother plants that are meant to live here in the long run to establish a successional arc for the long term, like some elderberries growing that we can take cuttings from or that we can just allow to grow in the landscape. All of this is in respect to the ecosystem that it lives within. It provides ecosystem service to wildlife and little creatures, and it also generates revenue for us, which is important if we want to be able to make our livelihood from the land we live on. And I think it's kind of beautiful. That part is subjective. The rest, I think, is I can make a strong argument for. But this is an image that captures what, in the middle of a season, a permaculture nursery can look like. You'll notice there's no complex infrastructure. There's no plastic in here. This is ecosystem functioning and moving along and generating a lot of yields. We're pretty small. We are a small team. Well, there's me in the center there. I got this ball rolling back around 2010 or so. Sasha, to my right, is my wonderful wife. We now have a little one with us. At some point, we'll do an update with who that person is, that little Zelda. And then Juan has been with us for a number of years. We do a complex and I think interesting profit-sharing model where we are all together making design decisions about what this company, what this business, what the arc of our work can look like. We have folks that come in and volunteer. We have folks that we might pay seasonally when we need pushes for shipping season, but we're a small team, very human-centric work. This is a photo from back when the nursery was just getting up to speed. I would guess this was about 2010. This was a year where I collected some chestnuts the fall before and grew them out. Strange photo here, seeing a bare root plant in full leaf, but at the time I didn't know any better, and so I thought, ooh, what a nice photo. It's a beautiful chestnut tree. Would not do that now, pulling them out of a pot in order to show them off. But this was the very early stages. I tried to collect some seeds from local trees, let me learn how to grow them out, start trying to sell them on a very small scale. It was entirely potted plant sales. We had no online presence. And that worked well enough as a place to start. It was a very scrappy, very slow, iterative start to the nursery. I don't know that I would do it any other way, to be honest. I don't know that I would know how. In fact, the first plant sale I brought potted plants to, this is a photo again from 2011, I forgot to bring, or I didn't even have any signage, and there was a white pine tree that had a bough on the ground, so a friend and I broke some branches and we made a little Edible Acres sign. It was a very first plant sale that was, I think we made about $150 in cash, and I felt so thrilled. It took days to prepare for and half hour to drive there, an hour to load and unload, but it was really thrilling. I remember doing that sale with Akiva Silver of Twisted Tree Farm, and we were both so excited with how the sale went for the day. We started small and we appreciated the growth. We learned a lot as we were going. In fact, part of the way I made a living early on with this work, this is the back of an old truck that I bought, clearly quite used, a little unsafe, but drove slowly with it. Here I was teaching a workshop on establishing food forest, and this was a company that sold potting mix in the Ithaca area. And so folks paid a sliding scale for the workshop. I brought plants that the business paid for. Folks also bought some potted plants, and I showed people how I lay out food forest ideas. We planted things together, and I was compensated decently for that, and people went home with some plants and ideas on food forest establishment. That felt like a neat way to start building a relationship in the community, building a reputation in the community as somebody who knows about these things. I was making it up as I went along. In a way, I still am, but the project went pretty nicely, and it was a fun thing to do and share. So it's a creative, alternative way instead of explicit plant sales. I think that was something I wanted to move towards, but I was open to the idea of installing landscapes for people, maintaining existing landscapes, doing these workshops, sharing things for free sometimes or for really low price sliding scale, and getting a foot in the door with all of this. Slowly over time, we've evolved into selling more and more bare root plants, which has been our ideal. There's just less total embodied energy. It's more respectful of the needs of the plants. And here you can see a very simple way where we process huge numbers of cuttings. So there's all sorts of willows through here. There's elderberry, there's black currants. So we process those in the dormant season. We bank them in sawdust, and then we start assembling our orders. We normally do September 1st and again March 1st for receiving orders online and shipping. And you can see how simple our shipping setup is. It's evolving every year, but it's pretty darn simple. Here Juan is assembling a package of some cuttings, in fact, and we use recycled plastic and sawdust we get from a local wood mill, and that's how we wrap up our plants. We heal in our bare root plants. I've spoken about this in some other videos. I think you can search for heal on our YouTube channel and find videos where we talk about this. And this is where we have bare root dormant plants that are banked into soil. You'll notice we don't have walk-in coolers. We don't have complex infrastructure. There's not an electrical dependency. We just simply bank the plants into soil for the winter, and then we can pull them in the spring as needed. Here, Sasha is assembling orders for shipping. But we like to personalize the orders and put them together in a nice way. We use leaf bags, and you can see on the bottom right here an old leaf bag from collecting leaves in order to insulate and protect plants during shipping. Lots of ways that we can scrap our way through the needs of getting these plants out the door. The shipping part of our business has evolved slowly over time, but it was local sales for quite a while, and it worked pretty well as a place to begin. I'm going to zip over this pretty quickly because, again, you can read this at your leisure if you follow the tiny URL in the description. But I think you don't need, here's a list of what you don't need to get the ball rolling. You don't need a huge budget. I think you can work well within a small framework and iteratively add to the business as time allows and as resources allow. I think you can start with a very small offering of plants. I offered up maybe 5 or 6 different plants for the first for a few years. It wasn't extremely fruitful, but it wasn't extremely risky, and that was very helpful. I started with all hand tools, and we still basically use almost entirely hand tools to operate this nursery, so you can work with what you've got there. We grow a lot of plants on very small plots, very intensively managed plots. You can even use driveways and things. We'll talk about air prune boxes and some strategies in that regard in other videos. But you can start where you are with what you have. I strongly believe that. The idea that you need infrastructure, you need a high tunnel, you need to have some sort of cooler or root cellar, you need to have a tractor, a rototiller. None of those things are necessary to get going. Maybe you want them later on, you realize you're specializing in certain particular crops that require that. That's fine, no judgment there, but you can absolutely start with what you have and start by offering up the plants that are in excess already. Maybe you've got strawberries that are pouring over a bed and you're losing your walkway. I used to sell bare root strawberries wrapped in wet newspaper on Craigslist every spring and every fall, and that generated a few $100 every year, and it gave us our pathways back. I sold raspberries in the same spirit. It can really be creative and really simple. Slow and small solutions are really appropriate. Volunteering at nurseries. I think this is a very worthwhile way to save money on getting going with plants, to build a plant collection, and to build relationships. So this is me visiting Triple Brook Nursery, well, me behind the camera. Really wonderful nursery person named Steve Breyer, who taught me a huge amount about perennial plant propagation. I would drive out to Southampton, Massachusetts every year and volunteer for a while, get a trunk full of plants to bring home. This is how we started with miscanthus and fuki and all of our bamboo varieties, whole bunch of other interesting plants, and I learned an immense amount. He got some help from me. I worked as hard as I could. I slept in the high tunnels there and brought my own food, and yeah, those sorts of relationships are extremely beneficial for everyone, and really help save a lot of money to get things going. Building local relationships, I think, is one of the most important ways to build resilience and also deeper sense of community. So here there's a photo of my old truck that I partially bartered for, and what you're looking at is a mountain of old hay. There's an older couple that do square bales of hay in our community. They know to call me up every spring to help clean out the barn of loose hay. I load up the truck. David and I load up the truck together, and we talk about things. We catch up. I bring all that material back home. They've got a clear barn for their hay storage for the season, and we can mulch our pathways. So here I'm dumping wheelbarrow loads of hay in our walkway in the spring and spreading it out. We get organic matter, weed suppression, beauty, soil life in exchange for helping some folks out who need the physical labor. And it's a win-win in all directions. So that's like one tiny little example, but that can spread in all directions. Again, I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this because you can read it. But things you can source for free or low cost. So for building soil, there's tons of options. What about wood chips where you are? Waste hay and straw, as I just mentioned. You really do want to ask, though, do they spray any chemicals? Manure, it's the same question. Are the animals dewormed? If not, that's fantastic. If so, I would use it, but I would wait, get the oldest piles. We talk about harvesting leaf bags on the channel quite a bit. That works wonderfully. We have our chicken system, which we'll talk about a little bit. Maybe you've got a creative animal integration system that can generate nutrients. Anyway, you can read through that if you'd like, but the argument that I'm trying to put forward, the sentiment here is over and over again, where you are with what you have, you can begin a small-scale nursery, and maybe it generates very little revenue at first. Maybe it's for barter and trade, which is fantastic. That's a major thing that we do, but it allows you to kind of learn what you're learning techniques for propagation in a low-risk way. You're getting a sense of what the niche is within your community where there is a need for plants. And we don't do grafted apple trees. There's another nursery in our community that does an incredible job with it. Why compete with them? Why bump up against that? And it takes a little while to learn in the ecosystem where you might fit in. So slow and small is safe, and it's more resilient, and it's more pleasurable, in my humble opinion. I'd like to show here a step-by-step example of how we go about, or how we in the past have gone about doing potted plant establishment for local sales. This could be something that's of interest to some folks, perhaps. Very, very simple, accessible, low tech, low complexity. The raw ingredients we use for doing potted plants, we start with upcycled pots. In this case, found a local nursery that was retiring. We got somewhere around a few thousand pots to work with. So that's something you don't really need to, definitely don't need to buy those new. We collect rainwater to hydrate them. You can use small ponds for this. We generate the potting mix mainly through old manure, old waste hay, and wood chips that are allowed to compost over winter. And the way we hydrate our potted plants as we go, so I've talked about this in videos. I think if you search for hugelkultur in a pot, you'll get a pretty good video description, to the best of my ability, of describing how we do these potted plants. But what we do is we pot them up in a simple way with salvage mix, aged compost that we generate over the winter. And here you can see rainwater's been put into a nice bucket, and the plants are soaked in the rainwater, and then they're sat over another bucket so that all the drippings, all the compost tea is collected and can be recycled and reused. So it fertilizes the plants as they go, and it saves immense amount of water to do the potting. Here we're leveraging the potted plants as a rhizome barrier. So we've got the potted plants sitting along the boundary between a garden space and a lawn. We just add wood chips around them, and that helps suppress the lawn and expands the gardens. Once the plants leave away or are sold and move away, we're able to then plant more crops and expand further and further. So you can leverage the potted plants in situ as a way to generate more garden space and a raised lawn. Over time, we've expanded how we grow, but we haven't done so by big financial investments in buying our own land. We've expanded by building more relationships with neighbors around us and farming small parcels. Here is a photo of some farming space right down the road from where Sasha and I live. We share this farm space with a wonderful older gentleman neighbor of ours who lets us farm in a nice open field space. It's been incredibly valuable. We do it entirely through just discussion and sitting down to dinner and coming up with ideas of how we can share the space and work together. There's no formalized agreement. We just check in periodically, and it's been working beautifully. Here is our wonderful neighbor Ian's lawn just to the south of where Sasha and I live. So literally our neighbor direct to us. And in 2020, I approached him about, hey, what if we started collaborating a little bit and growing more food where we both live and starting to hang out more and working on projects together? And he was open to it. Again, it's been entirely agreements through just discussion, not written, not legal binding, just community. But this is his lawn in 2020 when we first got started with this. And that same lawn has now evolved into a whole ecosystem. We've got a beautiful pond that he and I dug together with a rented machine. Solar panels laying around in order to pull water from the pond and hydrate our collective growing space. And it all just is unfolding as it goes. The more beautiful and verdant and abundant these landscapes are, the easier it feels to continue to evolve those relationships, deepen and expand, and affirm that it was the right decision for everyone involved. So the beauty of the ecosystem itself tends to facilitate and lubricate these sorts of things continuing. So it's really a beautiful way that can work. We also decided collectively that a high tunnel that lives on his land can be a nice benefit for everyone. And so we started building that high tunnel back in 2021. And now we have this space with figs and rosemary and tomatoes and hot peppers in the summer, and we all harvest from there. We've got greens that we're figuring out how to grow in the winter, and we do some nursery work in that space as well. Really functional and really abundant and very affirming of the idea of saying yes to us being in that landscape. I want to talk a little bit about the idea of having the nursery integrate with other aspects. So an annual cropping or other things you might be growing. It's not the best photo here, but there is garlic that was growing in and amongst rows of hazelnuts in our neighbor's field. We grew garlic as an annual crop. I mean, technically it's a perennial, but we grow it as a seed crop, and we integrate the garlic growing with the hazelnuts, growing with the chestnut trees, our nursery crops, to protect those trees. And I think your nursery aspirations can be integrated fully with other cropping systems in really creative ways. In fact, here's a photo of our garden at home. A lot is going on here. What we're seeing here is rooted cuttings in the middle of this space, so where it's opened up, we have plants. There's some gummies and there are some currants. So these are plants that we will sell through the nursery or we'll plant out into the landscape. So our nursery plants, but in the same bed we have lettuce, we have beets that are growing on the boundary, we have peas that are growing in Habilitia, which is a perennial mountain spinach, which we can propagate for the nursery or we can eat. So these plants, these financially driven possible plants, and the plants we want to put in our salad bowls and eat that evening, same bed, they can all integrate together in really beautiful ways. Same pictures happening here. It looks just like kind of a weedy wild garden space. That's true to some extent, but also it has a huge amount of things going on in here. So we've got nursery crops in the middle, Good King Henry, gumi seedlings, blackcap raspberries, and then on the boundaries or the edges are plants that we're interacting with. The mustards and the kales are things we harvest almost every day for our food. So the the business and the home use, that line is extremely blurry. It might not even be a line, it's just basically everybody's integrated together. We trend towards the picture of nursery crops are towards the center of a given bed. Our crops that we wish to harvest frequently are cut and come again, or are more zone one, more interactive plants. The lettuce, the parsley, the cilantro are on the edges of the bed because we don't need to interact with the nursery crops as frequently. That basic pattern's really quite functional for us and something to consider. But you could have a bed with chestnut seedlings right in the middle and carrots on the edges. I don't believe that there's any explicit rule that says no to something like that. Again, once more, nursery in the middle and plants that we consume on the boundaries. We cut weeds and cut plants that we don't need as we go, and we use that as a chop and drop mulch to feed the whole system. So it's quite functional, quite integrated, and we appreciate it. We really enjoy it. I think there's some principles or aesthetic, maybe sensibility, that drives a fair bit of the design in the work that I like to do and that we like to do within our nursery, and that is the kind of a mantra that carries through in most of the plantings is the idea of hedgerow mimicry. I find hedgerows, at least where we live, to be so comfortable. The hottest days of summer, that tends to be where I want to go. In a big open field, I want to be in the hedgerow. The coldest winter days with the wind blowing, I like to go closer to where the trees are nice and dense. And so I find myself designing that sort of sensibility throughout our own landscapes. It creates a lot of resilience. It creates nutrient flow systems. There's chop and drop opportunities throughout a system like that. And it creates habitat for us, for the human as needed. It also creates it for the animals and for the birds and the pollinators. So our layout, you can see here, this is a curated and cultivated space, although it may again look like a wild space, but there are elderberries on the boundary. There's hickory trees growing throughout. There's apricots. There's all sorts of plants happening through here. And then there are nursery aspects in these little microglades in the interior, along with annuals. And that has been profoundly functional, deeply rewarding, and actually profitable as far as total energy in for what comes out for our financial needs, our food needs, our medicine needs. It's been very worthwhile. I think systems for a home scale or a small scale permaculture nursery can be very simple, as I've tried to outline in this presentation, and in ways it can be quite passive. So we have rainwater collection systems that the overflow fills containers, fills small ponds, and so we have easy ways that we can dip in and use watering cans. So we've got this old salvaged metal barrel that I got off of Craigslist for a really low price. Somebody was doing maple syrup production or collection in it and wanted to get rid of it. And we're using that to water our plants. There's just there are no complex moving parts. There's no infrastructure that can really easily fail. What I lean on is high plant complexity, very complex perennial dominant systems, and low technology complexity. And that combo works towards our benefit of having a much more resilient and enjoyable system to work with. Some thoughts to consider moving forward if you do think about the idea of a small-scale nursery, either for a livelihood or for barter, or just for the pleasure or for resilience in your own community of growing up plants to share with others, is to operate within the boundaries of niche analysis. And so that's a permaculture principle, or a sentiment within permaculture, of really looking at the realities of the space that you're within. So what is naturally happening within your landscape, within the limitations of the landscape, the abundance, the benefits, and within the challenges, and with an eye towards what can happen in the future. And so I'm using this photo here to illustrate this concept because our landscape, where Sasha and I live, the half acre that we are lucky enough to be on, and the acre or so that our neighbor is generous enough to let us work with and farm, is just extremely wet. We are in an upland bog, and so for me to do dry crops, I would have to dig deep and bury drainage tile and really fight the landscape to just get rid of the water and force it to be what we want it to be. And over time, we're learning our nursery for this small landscape can start to focus more and more on wet tolerant, if not wet loving plants. So can we bring in more iris cultivars? Can we do more calamus? Can we explore mitsuba? Can we explore more skirret and sochan and all these perennial vegetables and medicines and beautiful plants that really like a wet landscape? Within the context of the business, what are the other nurseries that are occupying space that have been here for a while? There is a really great native plant nursery already. We don't need to make that our specialty. Like I mentioned before, there's folks that do grafted trees beautifully. There's my dear friend Akiva, who has a specialty in nut trees from seed. That's his niche. How can we fit within that and be mutualistic within our community? That's something to consider. What is happening in your landscape, what's happening in the businesses and the realities around you. What are the desires of the community for plants? How can you evolve into that slowly, gently, and in a resilient way that functions beautifully for you? Some thoughts to leave you with if this video was compelling and you feel excited about developing some plant growing either for income or for barter or for pleasure. Some questions to roll around in your mind, and perhaps in the comments you may want to actively engage with other folks and say what your thoughts are about some of these questions. Are there other questions you think are relevant? Let's continue the conversation in the comments, and I encourage you all to have dialogue with each other. Where within your landscape could you host some propagating efforts? Are there centers of beds that could work well? Are there marginal areas? Are there places a little harder to get to that don't require as frequent interaction? Is that something that's possible? Are there places within your region 10 miles, 20 miles away that you can volunteer, that you can collaborate with, that you can share or barter with? What sort of raw ingredients can you start the process of drawing into your landscape in order to facilitate soil growth? Is it potting mix? Are there resources that can be for pots, for plant propagation that could be supportive? You can do that in the middle of the winter for sure. Summer too, but it's nice to prepare in the winter and get going in the spring for sure. What are some limitations, time-wise, energy-wise, physical ability-wise, and how can we be helpful in addressing those? How can you ally with other people in your community to fill out where those limitations are so that you can move things forward? Are there people you can hire or connect with and work with? What can your landscape grow best? Is it particularly super shady? Maybe you are a mushroom propagator, or you're doing spring ephemerals. Are you specializing in ramps? Are you full blazing sun? Maybe seaberry is for you. All sorts of interesting ways to assess what your landscape is up to and figure out how to design plants that work best within those landscapes. What are your affinities? What are your strengths? What sort of things are most interesting for you to work with? Is this something that you would like to have be a business and work for you? What are your goals? Let's talk about that. So feel free to share those ideas in the comments and let's get some dialogue going there. I may or may not be extremely involved in that part of the conversation. I'll try my best to answer specific questions that come up as they come up, but hopefully amongst each other you can have some dialogue and make connections there. So this was part 1 of 4. I'll record the other ones and share them as time allows. There'll be a playlist that organizes all of them in order. To the best of my ability, I will edit the video such that there is a time breakdown of different parts, so you can return to this and find the areas you might find useful. I'm really open to feedback. Was this something that was useful to you? Are there ways this could have been better or more effective? Or are there aspects that were a little bit annoying or challenging? I'm really open to feedback there. Part 2, 3, and 4 will be focused on tools and techniques, on propagation specifics, and on ideas of how to really act on all this and move things forward. So hopefully that will be compelling. Again, if you found this useful, the first thing I would hope you would do is use it. Start propagating some plants. Think about integrating nursery work into your life if that feels like a compelling path. That would be the most rewarding thing to me. Second thing, if it's a value to you, is consider sharing this video, this YouTube channel with other folks that you think would derive some value from it. If you have the financial means and you're moved to do so, a tip through the PayPal portal there would be helpful, but please don't feel any pressure whatsoever. I'm very happy to share this content for free and definitely to whoever can find benefit from it. I feel like there's a nearly infinite need for more hardy, perennial, food-bearing plants in this world, so the more the merrier in my mind. And just knowing that there might be some people that decide to start growing plants for fun or for profit as a result of this is reward enough for me. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. Hopefully there's something in there. Feel free to continue the conversation in the comments. If you've got explicit questions, feel free to share them. I'll do my best to answer as time allows. And wishing you all success with whatever it is you're up to. Thanks for watching.